Hello, my name is Nicholas Junker, and this is my video for AEP 880, Cultural Diversity, Module 1, Personal Intro and Cultural Diversity Awareness. So a little bit about me. I grew up in a small town in north central Kansas called Cuba. Had about 200 people. I think now we're down to about 130 people. Went to school there until I was in the 8th grade. And then my school shut down, combined with Belleville to make Republic County High School. And that is where I finished my high school experience. After that, I went to Bethany College to major in social science education and play football. I really enjoyed my experience there. Bethany College is in Lindsborg, Kansas. It's a small town of about 3,500 people. It's a really tight-knit community, really progressive, and so I had a very great experience there. The picture of me, picture on the right is me on the left with my wife and our dog Oakley. We were married in 2016. We went up to South Dakota and got married. That's one of my wife's favorite places, and so that was something that was very enjoyable for both of us. Something of late that has been impacted me personally. Both of my parents have actually passed in the last 2 years, and I think in my short life experience, as I am only 29 years old, that has definitely had an impact on me, and understanding what is important in life pushed me to slow down and enjoy things more, and that's one of the reasons I've taken a brief hiatus from some of my courses here at Fort Hays. Is it has had an impact on me, and understanding that every day is important. So kind of my teaching / school timeline of what I've done. My first job out of college was at Larned High School. I was there for 2 years. I taught high school social studies. I coached everything under the sun: softball, basketball, tennis, whatever they wanted me to do is what I did. At the end of my time there, I was considering other options other than teaching, and I'm really into political science and law, and so I applied to a MA-JD program at the University of Kansas, was accepted, and so I started there that fall. And while I was there, I figured I had better make some money, and so there was a job at Topeka Seaman, and it was elementary PE. And so I did that along with attending some of my political science classes. You don't dive into law until your second year there in that combined program, and so I was excited about that, and I did that, and I had my first experience with elementary students. And let's just say that's not something that I'm going to do again. I enjoyed my experience, but it's definitely not my cup of tea there. And so a little bit into it, I realized that I really missed teaching and really wanted to get back into that. And so I then, about January of that year, applied for a job at Clifton Clyde High School, and I got the job there. And so we moved back to Belleville, Kansas, which is about 25 to 30 minutes from Clifton Clyde, and that's where I taught high school social studies and coached basketball. And so we had a good year there, and then towards the end of that year is when my mom got diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. And at that time, there was a teacher that I know that was leaving Republic County High School, which is where I graduated from and where my mom worked. And so it kind of just worked out that towards the tail end of that year, that job came open, and then I took it, and then I've been there since. This will be my 3rd year going into Republic County High School. I'm a high school social studies teacher, coach football and basketball. At the current time, I'm looking and getting some more leadership opportunities. I was part of the evaluation committee where we built a new evaluation tool for teachers. That was a great experience. I've been part of the senior project committee where we designed a senior project for our capstone experience for our seniors. That has been a great experience. And now I'm currently in charge of the seminar reconstruction, remodel, whatever you want to moniker you want to give it. We choose one on a different day, and we're currently rebuilding that to be more authentic and meaningful and relevant for our students. And so I'm definitely trending towards what I want to be more as a teacher, trending possibly into an administrative position. So some of my family history and background, predominantly German. My ancestors come from a long line of German landowners and farmers, some Germany and Prussia a little bit. It gets a little messy early in the early 1800s to mid 1800s. But my family, and you can look at the Junker history. Junker is kind of a German word for, I'm going to say, like a mid-level aristocrat, so to speak, and that's where the Junker name comes from. It actually is also pronounced Junker as well in German. And the closest lineage that I know or understand is around about the 1850s and 1860s. Germany was in kind of a challenging period in its nation, and ongoing a few revolutions, changing from a monarchy to a republic. And apparently parts of my family were supportive of the monarchy, and that wasn't a great climate to be in after they lost the revolution and went into what's known as the German Republic, right about 1870-ish. So that's when we migrated over. Not a lot of details about how we got there, how we got to Nebraska or to Kansas, but that's where that came from. A lot of traditional foods I remember growing up. For sure, the typical German foods: bratwurst, potatoes, German meatballs and gravy. That was something that we did. And one of the things that I find important, and one of the things that I know and cherish most about probably my German identity, is a very strong sense of family and community. Like I said, I grew up in a small town in Cuba. I currently live in a small town close to Republic County High School, and everybody looks out for each other. Everybody takes care of each other in those moments, and I think that's where that comes from, is that German heritage. Look at my 10 images for our family heritage. On the top left is a picture of Cuba, where I grew up. It is and is part of my identity. Growing up in that small town, those small town values has been something that's been very important to me, and so that's why it is pictured. That's actually our local store there up in the top left corner there, and then just a few other buildings, and then a local bar right there, and so that's been something that's been important. The school where I went early on was Hillcrest, and there's indicated by a sports shirt there. My mom was a teacher. My dad was a coach. And I spent nights at ball games and was at school all the time. That's something that's definitely part of my identity and encouraged me to become a teacher. I got a basketball, as I am currently a high school basketball coach, and that's something that I really enjoy and really like doing and watching and being a part of. And actually, a funny brief story is when my mother was pregnant, she was a junior high girls basketball coach, and she coached right up until the point where she was going to go into labor, and she was currently at a basketball game when she went into labor, and so that is where that photo means a lot to me. Trending into the picture, the next picture is my corgi, Oakley. He is wearing his Joe Biden costume for Halloween, so it mixed two of my passions, my love of my dog and political science, kind of trends into that piece there, and I think that political science is something that I'm very passionate about, obviously, with my brief hiatus from teaching, going to political science graduate school at the University of Kansas, and it molds my teaching as a government teacher as well. Then the picture at the top right is fairly self-explanatory. It's a breast cancer ribbon. My mother, like I said, lost her battle October of this last year to breast cancer. She had it for about a year and a half, and so it is definitely something that has molded me. And so that's why it's one of the pieces. In the bottom left-hand corner is some kindling. I really like that quote. I can't remember who it was, but it's something to the effect of, education is not the filling of a vessel, instead the kindling of a flame. And as my mother, my grandmother, and my great-grandmother were all teachers, as a fourth-generation educator, I think that's very important to me. Going on to my next picture is a fork in the road, and that's kind of something that my wife and I have talked a lot about lately. I'm almost finishing up with my administrative degree, and we have not bought a house here or around Belleville or Republic County, and we not sure what we're doing, where we want to go, where we want to be after this juncture, and that's kind of where that dictates. Next picture is a cornfield. I grew up in a small town, but my family is from Nebraska, and obviously corn is a big piece there. And my family's legacy is farming and the agrarian economy, along with teaching, and so that's where that picture fits in. I mentioned previously that I was at Bethany College playing football there, and so that was an interesting piece of my experience, was being part of that football team. And then in the far right is at the bottom my wife and I and Oakley at Coronado Heights, which is right outside of Lindsborg, where Bethany College is located. And my wife has had a dramatic impact on me as a child. And growing up, as we started dating when I was a sophomore in high school, and so she has definitely been a part of my growth going forward. So trending into our assignment about cultural diversity, the first video that we watched was about this being the sum of our parts. Something that really stuck out to me was that first quote is 7 seconds to make impressions to others and to take in impressions of others. I think that's important as we grow and understand and build our mentality, our understanding of ourselves, our schools, our communities, our entire environments. That's an important piece. I like the question that she brought up, is what makes up your jigsaw puzzle. And as we had that previous slide with those symbols, it definitely made me consider what is my life about? What is it? What am I? Who am I? Who's my family? What are my experiences? And I think that's interesting. I really liked when she talked about how you can use people's perspectives and have a diversity of perspectives, and it will help your school, your environment, whatever you're doing, and you can use those triumphs and tragedies of every person, every individual, and that will be a positive impact on your school and your community, is through understanding and using everyone's life experience. That's important, and that kind of trends into the next bullet there, is if we don't understand who we are, irregardless of the skills that we have, we will be not as well off if we don't share our understanding and our experiences. I thought one thing that was really that I liked a lot was her metaphor about painting, is that we all have something to contribute, and can contribute to the growth and understanding of a masterpiece if we understand and excel about what we can contribute. And I came up with this, and I really like this, and as I was reflecting on the other sources as well, I think that this maybe really sums up what I feel about cultural diversity, is that it's a greater understanding equals greater commonality, and she kind of hit on that a little bit, but I tried to round it out together with the best thing I could come up with, is if we really truly understand others and understand ourselves, we really can bring an understanding that we're not all that different, and through that understanding and that commonality, we can really truly grow. So the next source that we looked at was It's Past Time to Appreciate Cultural Diversity. It was another YouTube video, and I thought that I really liked her sourcing material that she kind of looked at, and one of them was that 2/3 of people surveyed felt the necessity to Anglicanize, and so I thought that was unique, is that individuals who really wanted to be part of their workplace and be part of their experience felt necessary to change who they were and how they interacted with their environment. And I thought that was really eye-opening, and that's not something obviously we want to do. She also talked about it was really important to understand that diversity pays. She discussed a study of the top quarter of companies for ethnic diversity. 35% were more likely to experience greater profit than their competition. I think that's something that we have to focus on, is that not only is it good, and not only is it morally and ethically good, it pays. And I think that's a piece where we can attempt to try to bridge the gap, and something that I'll focus on in one of my last slides. She also talked about how culturally diverse teams are more innovative. We look at everybody has a differing and varied experience, and I think that's a way in which we can understand and build upon all of our shared experience by cultivating that growth. And so when we look look at that growth, we understand that, as she said in the video, that the generation of teachers and students and people in the world, as being a millennial, she stated a harrowing conclusion that the millennial generation is unlikely to crack the cultural ceiling. That's something that's I take as a challenge as a teacher and as a person who can mold the minds of our youth, and then eventually, as I'm an administrator, hopefully driving the conversation and culture forward for diversity and inclusion. So looking at the next video that we watched, he talks about the challenges of cultural diversity. And this statistic that he brought up really stuck with me, is that there's an estimated 1 billion immigrants. So that's 1 in 8 people, roughly. And I thought that was something that is, it is exciting. It is a harrowing challenge. But it is something that can really contribute to the success that we talked about on the last slide, that diversity pays. And we can definitely, as long as we look at it as an advantage, as a way in which we can grow ourselves and our communities, I think that it's a very positive thing. So looking at some of the challenges we looked at cultural diversity, is that conflict and frustration occur when individuals either lack knowledge of or choose to ignore differing cultural ideas. And I think that's something that Mr. Ting focused on, is that when we don't understand, when we don't reach out and empathize and look to understand where others' experiences and histories and understandings come from, we can't grow and understand and build positive ideas and structures without that understanding. And because when we don't have the understanding, then that leads to stereotyping, and as he stated in the video, results in prejudice. He talks specifically about 3 different kinds of prejudice in different forms, really. The first one is xenophobia, which was a fear of others and their culture and their differences. I think that we've definitely seen a rise in prejudice and in xenophobia specifically over the last 6 to 7 years, without really getting too political. That's something that has definitely grown. And then looking at ethnocentrism, when I obviously teach American history and those things, we look at that throughout history. And this, it's not a new thing, but it's something that ebbs and flows, much like many other things in history. It's a superiority. You believe that your culture, your race, your ethnicity, your social class is superior to others, and that's not something that's definitely positive for our schools, communities, what have you. And then when we look at racism, when we look at either through directed emotion and actions of really putting forth that ethnocentrist and xenophobic mindsets, that you're either afraid or you think that you're better, and so you direct some emotional attacks or actual actions of racism towards. And then one of the last pieces he focused on was explicit and implicit pieces of racism, and I think that he focused specifically that implicit is something that is probably more common today than it was historically. They specifically referenced the Starbucks video of the 2 African American men that were arrested for waiting for an individual for a business meeting, I believe, and those things take place on a fairly normal basis in the United States, and we talked about that. Sometimes our structures and institutions have implicit racism, irregardless if we consciously decipher those things, and we definitely have to remedy those. And I think that if we truly understand, I think that's where I focus on that first slide, is greater understanding equals greater commonality, and I think that's something that we really have to focus on. So looking at our last source was the research article from American Planning Association, is how do we bridge that gap? So we looked at that diversity is a positive. We looked at there are some of those challenges that are paramount for us to overcome, And so how do we engage diverse communities to make sure we encourage that growth, that understanding and commonality? So I think the first one is and he focused on the anonymous source, focused on got to get to know your community. One of the things that I've always done when I interview for a job or when I look to go to a different school is I look at the city Facebook page, I look at demographics, I look at historical events or historical trends. To truly understand and truly know what a community is about, you have to know the people. And to truly grow in a school setting and as a school leader, you really have to understand what your community finds important and what the school then eventually will find important as well. They have to connect with community partners. I think that's something that is sometimes not made a priority, especially when you look at a school setting. I don't think that we do a good job, and maybe just speaking for our school specifically, of getting out in the community, working with business leaders, working with other community partners, nonprofits, to be able to identify stakeholders that can help and can build a bridge to whatever it is that you're trying to do. And I think that's vital. And also encouraging collaboration among those things. I mentioned briefly that I'm in charge of what's called the senior project. And so we are trying to have students go out in the community and build bridges with people that are in a career interest that they have. And so that's something that we're doing and slowly attempting to do so. And you can really try to build that diversity of understanding and inclusivity when you branch out like that. And then a piece or a challenge that exists is what are some of the things that your community doesn't have or is not available or is not successful in when you're trying to engage them. Now, in my community is pretty homogenous, so there's not a ton of language barrier. Technology access isn't a big one, but I would say the last two maybe are pieces. We have a pretty steadily growing lower class and lower middle class, and so some of those things around transportation and knowledge of issues, challenges, or problems in the community maybe are not something that stakeholders are aware of as much. And so I think those are some things that we really need to look at and try to provide stopgaps for that we can do. And then that last little piece he focused on, I think is very important, is we have to build purposeful institutional and structural partnerships for collaborative conversation and growth. I think I really focus on those institutions and structures because, you can do it one person at a time, trying to really chip away at the lack of inclusivity and diversity in your community. But I think providing opportunities and structures for that conversation, for that greater understanding and commonality, I think is where you really can encourage growth. So looking at familiar characteristics, myself, our school, our community, and our state. Like I said, I was born in North Central Kansas. We're very homogenous, white, Anglo-Saxon Christians, very, very lacking of diversity. And in my experience, I've been around small towns, very homogeneous communities, and so it did lack some diversity. But one of the places in which I was able to really embrace and understand diversity a little bit is my wife's siblings. My wife has 4 brothers and sisters, so there are 5 total. And after my wife was born, her mother had to have a hysterectomy, but she still wanted to continue to have children. And so they adopted Kagan in 2004 and then Katie in 2006. And so both Kagan is a mixed race person. He is African American, Caucasian, Hispanic, and Vietnamese. And we've really kind of looked and tried to understand where does his identity lie? What are some of the things that are important to you, Kagan, and your understanding of who you are as a human being? And that's something that has been really fruitful, I think, in his experience. And Katie, she was actually born in Guatemala City, Guatemala, and she was an international adoption. So she has really embraced that among her family, but I don't think that's something that she's really embraced among her friends, and we've tried to encourage her to do so. And I think that's something that's pretty neat. So I would say, so looking at some of the traditional characteristics from the articles as it relates to my community, and a lot of small rural communities in Central America and in the United States, Midwest specifically. There's a lot of xenophobia, and it masks masking as ethnocentrism, and so it's like that fear, that misunderstanding, specifically with Hispanic culture, is we think that people think that they're better than or they understand, but really when we truly try to bridge that gap, people just have that lack of understanding. So I think that in my local community, and some of the communities I've been with that have been fairly homogenous, it's just been that lack of understanding. But in some of the communities I've been in, like when I was at the University of Kansas and when I was at Topeka, there are pockets of phenomenal diversity, very progressive ideas, looking at systemic change, looking at inclusion, and building an understanding around diversity has been pretty neat to see in some of those communities. And so one of the things that we have to look at statewide specifically as well is the structures that we have in place are built with homogenous Kansans in mind. And I think that's something that I would say needs to be taken at the greatest look at, is things like your calendars, your school are built around Christian holidays. They're not built around, I think, with the new holiday, federal holiday of Juneteenth. I think that's something that is a good thing for understanding for local communities. Things like textbooks. As a history teacher, that's something that's been a pretty significant topic regarding diversity and inclusion, and also just the state of mind. We don't have a lot of diversity, but that doesn't mean our kids and our students aren't ever going to see that diversity. I think that we have to really encourage that growth in our school. And also looking at a lot of our parents have that misunderstanding of diversity, and the latest hot topic of the day has been critical race theory. My principal in North Central Kansas has been criticized. We have been criticized for teaching critical race theory, and we're not. But people don't really understand critical race theory as on its surface, and so I really think that lack of understanding is really the gap we have to bridge to bring in greater diversity and inclusion to our schools and our communities. So looking at application of my new knowledge, I think there's kind of 5 specific pieces, 4, and then a greater, more theoretical understanding. First is supporting staff training regarding equity and inclusion. Even in small communities like ours, I think that we really have an opportunity to encourage our kids to drive towards a greater understanding of inclusion and diversity in others, because when they go off to college or when they go out into the workplace, those things are going to be there, whether we have those in our school or not. So also taking a big broad look at institutions and structures surrounding inclusivity. I think that's something that we really have to take a look at, is how do our institutions, our schools, our city politic, our law structures, how do they look at inclusivity and diversity, and take a broad look at those. And then, as one of the specific sources indicated, we got to build coalitions of diverse stakeholders. Like, I think that we really have to drive the conversation forward about how we can improve, and we can't do that unless everybody's at the table. And that kind of bridges the gap with that last one, is encouraging conversations. And the last little piece is, I think is so important, and I put that, and I talked about it in a few slides, is with greater understanding comes greater commonality. If we can really drive the conversation forward about who others are and who we are, we can really come together as a community, school, and as a state. So looking at our standards here, we're CLL 3.1. This assignment correlated to the learning outcome by demonstrating possibilities of inclusive culture, specifically working on diversity. This assignment also included various strategies and some of the challenges as well with diversity going forward. Look at this standard was relevant because this assignment was relevant to providing me with benefits, challenges, and strategies of an inclusive and diverse classroom. It really challenged me to look at what my surroundings are, and then the impact I can have on those things. And finally, with the personal reflection, growing up in North Central Kansas, homogeneity is the norm. I think, irregardless of that, we really must embrace diversity And the greatest impact on presentation comes from it can have an impact on your bottom line. It can also have an impact on diverse communities, and we need to really try to grow that in the future. And we can really do that by using the research and strategies, especially specifically from the American Planning Association, to really drive that conversation forward about engaging diverse communities. Now here is my work cited for those 4 sources that we used. That is the conclusion of my video. Thank you.